Well, good morning everyone. It's your old pal Jordan the Lion. How are all of you today in the new year? Excellent. Well, I think today is going to be a fun day. We're doing something on one of my favorite people in history, and if I want it to be a fun day, I want to wear a fun shirt. And since we swung by Buc-ee's yesterday, I got this new 80s themed Buc-ee shirt, and we're going to do it right. Days with Jordan the Lion and Jaw begins now. Alright, unfortunately Breck's sick today, so I'm going to be doing this vlog alone. So we are going to do a special Patreon sunglass vlog today for Pam M. Pam, I hope you're a fan of Elvis Presley because we are going to Fort Hood where Elvis reported for duty in 1958. So during that time, Elvis also used to come to Waco and had a little bit of history of Waco. So we're gonna go to Fort Hood and then come back and do some stops here in Waco. Well, my friends, we have made it to Fort Hood. So in 1957, Elvis Presley was arguably the biggest star in the world, and he was at the height of his prime probably because he was only 23 years old. He decided to go to Graceland, his new home, and spend the holidays, and it was on December 20th of 1957 that Elvis was notified that he had been drafted. And so initially, he had no problem with this. I mean, he didn't necessarily want to go because he was in the height of his prime, but he had been an ROTC, he was patriotic, and so this was no big deal to him. However, his fans didn't like this because they couldn't handle the thought of 2 years of no Elvis. And so people started writing letters to the draft board, they started writing letters to President Eisenhower, and Paramount Pictures itself was just about to start a movie with Elvis Presley called King Creole. So because of all of this, they basically decided that it was for everyone's best interest to let Elvis have a deferment for 60 days. So instead of joining in on January 20th, he would join in when he was finished filming his new movie. And once he finished that, he did go and enlist in Memphis, and they sent him over to Arkansas initially for his fitting and that famous haircut, and 3 days later he was right here in Fort Hood for the next 6 months. Now initially, when he first got his notice, he had offers from various branches of the military wanting to offer him basically special treatment. The Navy and the Air Force both were offering him to basically have a cushy job going around recruiting people, as well as maybe possibly entertaining. Even some branches said, hey, we'll put you in a squadron with your buddies from Memphis. They also said, we'll name a squadron after you. But Elvis didn't want any special treatment, and a lot of people said Colonel Tom Parker didn't want him to have any special treatment either. They believed that Colonel Tom said, if you go in, you don't allow him to treat you any different, you'll come out bigger than you started. And he was pretty much right. Now it appears right from the get-go, Elvis had a great attitude about this from the very beginning. When he went and signed the papers, he walked out of the building with his parents, and they said that he looked back at his Cadillac that he had there, a big black Cadillac, and he looked at it and said, "Goodbye, you long black SOB," and just started laughing. And they said when he would come to Arkansas and people were trying to make an exception so he didn't have to cut his hair, he said, nah, let it go. Hair today, gone tomorrow. So he had a really great attitude about all of this. Here in front of us you can see some of the drills that Elvis likely would have had to go through when he first arrived. But yeah, they said from the time that he arrived, it was almost like they flicked a switch and that he just immediately became a soldier. They said he liked being one of the guys, didn't like any special treatment. In fact, when he was on the base here, he had brought a car with him, but he would trade cars with another soldier so that he wouldn't be recognized in town. And apparently in order to get out of basic training, you had to hike a 15-mile trek with a 80-pound backpack on. And they said this was not an easy task to begin with, let alone being in Texas in July when they were doing it. And they said that there were medics off to the side constantly coming out helping soldiers that were passing out, and Elvis never passed out. And I believe Elvis was even a squadron leader when he came. They said he was a pretty good leader as always, but he didn't like telling people what to do, so he ended up getting all 30 men that he was basically in charge of wristwatches as gifts. Now, all the interviews I could find with anyone that served with him said he was a great soldier. They said that he was literally, like I said, not treated any different, hardworking, and they said they all came to like him so much. They said initially you were kind of afraid to talk to him, but they said he was just easygoing, one of the guys, and it got to a point where they said if they heard anybody make a comment out in public or mock him, they would stand up for him. Now, all Elvis fans know that Elvis was extremely close with his family, and they were sad when he had to go in, but as you might imagine, Elvis didn't leave him behind. He had a small place here originally, and then once the basic was over, his entourage had gotten too big and he had to rent a house here in town, so we'll go over and check that out. But they had a few tanks on display, and since that's what Elvis was trained in, tank accuracy for that 6 months before they were sent over to Germany, I figured we should go take a look. And to think that this guy to kids was a hero and to parents was like a laughing stock in some cases. And then once he came into the military, he was the guy operating these. They said that they would have drills where they would have to be tested on their accuracy, and the guys in his troop said that they got to the point where they could hit something dead on from 1,500 yards away. Now, sadly, Elvis joined March 28th of 1958. That was his first day here at Fort Hood, and by August his mother would pass away, and that would be a huge, huge thing for Elvis. Wow, take a look at that incredible statue. The helmet alone is just amazing, but the whole thing is quite impressive. I found out they had a third Cavalry Museum. Made sense to come here. Well, this monster's an M18 Hellcat, and then right next to it is a tank destroyer. Elvis went from earning $1 million a year to earning $78 a month here for the first 4 months. Then it was increased to $83 a month, and then by the time he was discharged as a sergeant, he was making $141 a month. However, Elvis donated his entire salary to charity. While Elvis was here, he was trained in tanks and wore the 3rd Armored Division patch and was assigned to the 1st Medium Tank Battalion. He also qualified as a sharpshooter. So I guess one cool thing about vlogging Elvis today is I got my own Fort Hood guest pass. Now we're heading out of the military base. The house wasn't more than, looks like about 8 minutes off of base. So at the time, this was considered the nicest neighborhood in town, and Elvis rented this house right here for $1,500 a month off of the local judge, Judge Crawford. I guess he told people, he and Lamar Fike, Gladys, Minnie Mae, and Vernon all lived in this house, and Lamar and Elvis told people that it was the mayor's house, but apparently it was actually the judge's house. So he rented this for a few months because they were all living in like a mobile home for a couple of months, and there were 5 of them, so they ended up renting this place for $1,500 a month. Kind of cool to see where Elvis would have rented for his family to live in. So I mentioned that Elvis had a little bit of Waco history. Not only did he play his 3rd show ever in Waco, but he had a really great friend there that owned a house, and Elvis used to go there with his girlfriend Anita and his mom, and they would stay there periodically while he was stationed here at Fort Hood. So let's go check out that house. Well, we're back in Waco. I see a downtown Waco sign. Now this is really cool to see for me. If you can see the front entryway, They've got the lions that kind of give it that Graceland look, and then you can see Elvis right there on the door. This is known as the Elvis House now. You see, this was the home of Eddie NADAL, and Eddie was a disc jockey in Dallas when Elvis was first coming up, and so he was a supporter of Elvis early on and used to play his records, so they became great friends. And when Elvis started playing gigs, he was playing Waco early on, the Heart of Waco Coliseum, and before and after the shows he would come here and hang out with Eddie. Now they became fast friends, and every time Elvis would come back through, he'd hit up Eddie, and then when he got stationed at Fort Hood, whenever he could get a day off at Fort Hood, he would come here and hang out, and they treated him like family. I saw an interview with Eddie, and he said this was absolutely, Elvis was family. He said if whatever records he was into at the time, if it was Fats Domino or who else, Paul Anka or Connie Francis, he said I would go get those records for Elvis and I would have him here, and then he would come over whenever he wanted. He had a room. His room was actually right over in that section right there. It was the NADAL family house from the very beginning. They built it in 24, but he said Elvis would come and sit at the piano, and then he would learn those songs on the piano and he would play the piano. And they said the first time that he came here to eat, they got out their best china and their best crystal and everything, and they cooked him this great meal and served it to him in the dining room. And he said, Eddie, if you ever want me to come back, I want to eat in the kitchen from now on. And they said from then on, they always ate in the kitchen. When Elvis was first at Fort Hood, his mom hadn't accompanied them. So when he would come here and stay, he would call his mom, and Eddie said, you know, even though Elvis liked being a soldier, he liked being one of the guys and everything, he was hurting inside because he really believed, he told his mom on the phone, he said I would hear him crying to her for an hour, and he would tell me the same thing. He would say, Eddie, my career's over. Everybody's gonna forget about me by the time I come out of the Army. Nobody will care. I'll be nobody. I'll just be, you know, I'll be driving a truck again. And he'd say, no, you're a household name. Everybody loves your music. Colonel Parker was smart enough to have Elvis record a bunch of extra music, and that way the whole time that he was serving, they were sporadically releasing it. Now this house, I told you, is known as the Elvis House. It's because they turned it into an Airbnb. The family still owns it, and I was interested in staying there, but you had to book 2 nights, and it was a $125 cleaning fee, so maybe some other time I'll do it. But like I mentioned, he would sit on the phone with his mom, but then once Elvis was there for, you know, quite a while and basic training was over, his family all moved for a good bit of the time to the house that we just saw over by Fort Hood in Killeen. So they said when Elvis would come here, he would always bring his mom along with him. And his mom and Eddie's wife would go to the grocery store together, and they would buy the foods that Elvis liked, and they would cook the foods that Elvis liked. And Eddie said we never knew, we never saw that she was sick. You know, he said she was overweight and her face seemed a little pale and she never smiled, but we never had any inclination that, you know, that she was that sick. And when she ended up passing away, he helped console Elvis. He went to Graceland and actually came back from Graceland with Elvis to Waco and then took him back to Fort Hood. You're just a random guy that came running over here yelling at me, huh? You're not a hound dog, are you? Now I looked online and saw that nobody's staying in here right now, so I don't feel as bad standing out here filming all this stuff. But when he was coming here, Eddie said that he would bring his girlfriend Anita with him a lot also. And Eddie said, I just got into a habit of, I bought like a suitcase size recorder, and I would just set it up in the room where we were all hanging out, and I would just hit record and I would just record the conversations. So the house now is a dedication to Elvis, and the entire house, I believe, is still set up the same way it was when he came here, along with some Elvis mementos in there, because of course Eddie was a huge Elvis fan. So hopefully in the future at some point we'll be able to come back here. I just figured for one vlog I'd kind of rather, if I'm going to stay and have to do a couple of nights, I'd rather do this on its own vlog and we'll just do a full tour throughout the house. But I thought that was a great story. This, like I said, it's not just, Eddie even used to tour with Elvis, unpaid, but in those early days, a lot of times Elvis would just invite him to go out on the road and he would go out on the road with him. So that's kind of a time in Elvis history. Sometimes we as Elvis fans, I think you don't ever think about is those 2 years where in his mind, he's thinking, I'm finished, my career's over. And in here, he would have been calling his mom, relaying those, telling Eddie those same fears here. Pretty cool to be here. And I'll show you a little clearer shot of the supposed Elvis room. I guess until I get in there myself, I won't be able to confirm it, but I did see a documentary where they were showing this window as his room. So the last stop I wanted to make today was to one of Elvis's favorite eateries here in Waco called the Elite Cafe. Let's take a ride over there. Okay, so the Elite Cafe was a very, very famous place in Waco history, not just because of Elvis, but now it's changed its name and it has new owners. There are actually two of Elvis's favorite places right next to each other. You can see now it's called the Magnolia Table, but this used to be the Elite Cafe, and they used to have a slogan out front that said, "We're the elite meat to eat." And Elvis used to eat here. They had burgers and steaks and milkshakes and all that stuff back in the 50s. Said this was really popular because the traffic circle is right here, and before the 35 freeway came through, this was pretty much an essential circle that you had to go through as you were coming from Dallas or Fort Worth to Austin. And so they said that this became a really popular place, but it also became popular because it used to have lines going all the way around the building because they used to advertise indoor air conditioning. That's right. Who wouldn't want to wait in line so that they could eat in the fresh, cool, air-conditioned air? They actually have a historical landmark sign up there. Let's go take a look. Here it said the first Elite Cafe opened in downtown Waco in 1919 and was acquired by the Greek immigrant Kalias family in 1920. The Kalias brothers opened the Elite Cafe in 1941 on the Circle. That would be this one. A traffic hub built on Waco's suburban edge in the early 1930s. A highly recognized local landmark and one of the top best remaining regional examples of mid-20th century roadside architecture. The building exhibits a distinctive Spanish colonial style popular in the Southwest. Now the Elite Cafe as we knew it closed down in 1999 and then off and on had various owners up until about 2016 when they finally closed down the Elite Cafe altogether. Now, the Magnolia Table may sound familiar to you if you know the fixer-uppers, Chip and Joanna Gaines, because they purchased this a few months after it closed down. They auctioned off all of the leftover things inside and donated that to charity, and then they opened up this restaurant. Now, right next door was one of Elvis's other favorite places. Let's go take a look at that. There's the traffic circle if you were wondering. They said when this first opened in the 40s, this was all surrounded by cotton fields. Yep, Elvis's other favorite Waco stop, Health Camp. I guess it's pretty easy to assume that Elvis spent a lot of time up here on the traffic circle. Pretty cool old spot, still here. Alright, that's gonna do it for us today. Hope you all enjoyed this. And just like Elvis, I think we can all say, I survived the Circle Health Camp. Alright, I want to thank Walter Simpson, Debbie Jackson, and Susan Friend for becoming my newest Patreons. Pam, Emma, I hope you enjoyed your sunglass vlog, and I hope everyone enjoyed seeing Elvis's home in Fort Hood and where he used to hang out with his friend Eddie at Eddie's place. Have a great night, everyone. We'll see you all later. Goodbye.